I'll call to order this regular meeting of council of Tuesday, October 16th, 2012, and just ask for motion to approve the agenda, please. Councillor Bauman, second. Councillor Zinchenko, all in favor, and carried. Thank you. We've got 3 sets of minutes to adopt. Just been advised of a minor change on one, which is on page 7, and this was in the presentation of Mr. Neal and Mr. Phillips. At the top of page 7, there was mention about 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 lines down about requesting height variances and minor setback variances. Those should be deleted because what they would have to do actually is request a rezoning. It wasn't going to be variances. So with that amendment, I'll just ask for a motion to adopt those minutes, please. Councillor Frederick, thank you. Councillor Bauman, second. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Any inquiries at this point? All right, let's move straight into administration reports, and I'll ask the Director of Planning to just highlight his report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be quite brief as it's a brief report and I believe fairly self-explanatory. There are 3 options presented for Council's consideration as means of moving forward or in some way tackling the issue of the proposed official community plan bylaw amendment to incorporate the Gospel Rock neighborhood plan. Those options are detailed in the report. Option A would essentially proceed with the plan as currently written. There's a recommendation there as to how to enact that. Option B would be to revise the plan in some manner, and there's some verbiage here in terms of how council, should council wish to pursue this option, how council wishes to amend the plan will change how the process would need to unfold from that point onward. Any change that results in a difference of use or density, so changes to the land use configuration or changes to the number of units, does require that we repeat parts of the process. Other types of changes do not have that same requirement, so the recommendation there, should council wish to pursue that option, is simply that that staff report back as to what the appropriate process would be given the changes that council would be seeking to make. Option C would be to decide to proceed no further with the Gospel Rock neighborhood plan, which would leave the present zoning and present policies that are currently in the official community plan in place. I have included as an appendix to the report a brief summary, to the best of my ability, of the correspondence and verbal feedback that we received at the public hearing, and there was quite a lot of it, as you can see from the summary, and have attempted to categorize somewhat the points raised either in support or in opposition to the plan. You can see quite clearly that we have received a majority of submissions that were made against the proposed bylaw, 147 against the proposed bylaw, 49 in support, and some that were sort of neither for nor against. The principal points, and I think this was quite apparent at the hearing, there was a general opposition to the development of the waterfront plan. In support, many people raised the issue that passing the plan would bring closure to a long outstanding issue. There were some general statements made, quite a few statements about the environmental protection policies in the plan being inadequate or insufficient, a feeling that areas should be preserved for park or additional areas should be dedicated to parkland, and I think a general feeling that there were problems with the process itself were also expressed quite a few times. So you can see in that figure 3.11 that I sort of made an attempt to outline the frequencies with which these individual issues were raised.
Okay, thank you. So I'll proceed with a statement as to my views on this, and then we'll hear from each of the councillors this evening. And I will be reading primarily from the statement because it's important that there be clarity in what's being said. So our task this evening is to make a decision with respect to the proposed amendment to the official community plan to incorporate a neighborhood plan for the Gospel Rock area. The Director of Planning in his report has laid out certain options for consideration by Council. Before addressing those options, I want to take a moment to clarify some matters, as it became clear to me in reading all of the written submissions and in listening to the oral presentations at the public hearing that some people may not have a complete understanding of some of the facts. This is not surprising, because not everyone will have had the opportunity to follow the process in its entirety since its inception several years ago. Firstly, a few submissions seem to be based on the assumption that this plan was hastily concocted by this council since the last election. The fact is that this council inherited the plan from previous councils, which had formulated the essence of the plan as a result of several surveys, public consultations, and establishment of 2 different committees specifically tasked with devising a plan. All of these activities were guided by the advice of a team of professional planners and consultants with the firm of Holland Barr, together with the town's own directors of planning and a professional planner hired by the town to specifically provide advice on this plan. While the Gospel Rock area has been a subject of interest for many years, the genesis of the plan that we have to deal with effectively began on October 18, 2005, when the council of the day retained the firm of Holland Barr to develop a neighborhood plan for the Gospel Rock area. In order to frame the issues, the consultants began their task by conducting interviews with the landowners, members of the Friends of Gospel Rock, conservation representatives, Sunshine Coast Regional District representatives, and staff from the Ministry of Transportation, the Department of Fisheries, and the Ministry of the Environment. To assist the consultants with public input, the Council, on January 17, 2006, established a select committee of 16 persons, largely made up of individuals in the community, and Councillor Johnson as the Council appointee at the time. The consultants then undertook a number of events. In January 2006, they began with a public survey and collected 62 responses. This was followed on January 21, 2006, by a community mapping exercise attended by 85 people. On February 22, 2006, an open house attended by 100 people was held to review the information to that point. This was followed by a visioning exercise attended by 45 people on April 1, 2006. On April 18, 2006, the consultants submitted their first report outlining opportunities and constraints in the development of the Gospel Rock area. This was followed by a 2-day design charrette held April 21 and April 22, 2006, attended by architects, planners, engineers, landowners, and members of the public. On May 30, 2006, the consultants held an open house attended by 120 people to review 4 concept plans that had been developed as a result of the previous events. Interestingly, 2 of the concepts included waterfront development and were ranked highest by those attending that open house. Following all of this input, the consultants developed a preferred plan, which was then presented to the Select Committee, and as reflected in the minutes of the meeting of the Select Committee on August 3, 2006, all members stated that they could support the preferred option, which at that point included 12 waterfront single-family homes. That preferred option was then presented to the Council on August 15, 2006, and the Council directed the consultants to proceed using the preferred plan with the proviso that any waterfront development be sensitive to ecological values. A few months later, on February 6, 2007, Council requested the consultants to formulate 2 plans, one of which would include waterfront development and one of which would not include waterfront development. On May 15, 2007, Council established terms of reference for an environmental assessment study of the blocks 6 and 7 areas, which was delivered by Mr. Larson and Mr. Van Poppelen in November 2007. On June 2, 2008, an open house attended by approximately 200 people was held to present what was then referred to as Plans A and B. This was followed up with a voluntary survey, and they emphasized not a referendum, as has been mistakenly assumed in some of the submissions. On October 6, 2008, the Select Committee completed its work and recommended the non-waterfront Plan B to Council. At a Council meeting on November 4, 2008, Council voted to choose Plan B. Unfortunately, due to irregularities in the conduct of that meeting, it became necessary to rescind that choice, which was done by Council on January 20, 2009. On June 2nd, 2009, Council established a refinement committee for the purpose of addressing some of the concerns of the plan that had been recommended by the Select Committee. This refinement committee included the then Mayor Janik and Councillors Curry and Coopmans, Chris Marshall, the town's Director of Planning, Art Phillips, the landowner's consultant, and the late Michael Rosen, the town's consultant. Councillor Coopmans subsequently resigned from council and was not replaced on this committee. This committee held a variety of meetings over a period of 18 months, as well as arranging for an open house on June 29, 2010, and another public information meeting on April 6, 2011, to present a plan with the revisions that had been made. The plan devised by the Refinement Committee was then recommended to Council by that committee on November 22, 2010. That plan, as recommended by the Refinement Committee, included the option of development on the waterfront. The last Council held a number of meetings to discuss and further modify some aspects of the plan. This work was continued by the present Council with some further adjustments resulting in the plan that is now before us. Many of the points that have been raised through the written submissions and the oral presentations are not new considerations. They have been discussed and considered at various times through the 7 years that the plan has been under development. Choices have been made at various stages in the process. Some people will agree with some of those choices, while others will disagree. The nature of the process requires compromise, and no one should expect that only their views will be accommodated. As has been stated many times through the process, this is intended to be a high-level plan providing a general roadmap for the potential future development of this area over the next several decades. It's very likely as time passes and we develop some experience with the plan that it will require adjustment, and that's part of the reason that the plan currently includes within it a mandatory revision for it to be reviewed in 5 years' time. Some of these submissions make the erroneous assumption that the plan constitutes a rezoning of the area. It does not. It simply establishes areas where consideration would be given to rezoning to permit development contemplated by the plan. It will still be necessary for an applicant to apply for a rezoning if they wish to develop in accordance with the plan. It is at the time of a rezoning application that the applicant would be required to satisfy the town that it can meet all necessary geotechnical, environmental, and infrastructure requirements. It is also at that point that the town has an opportunity to consider the matter of any amenities depending upon the nature of the proposed rezoning and development. Amenities do not form part of the neighborhood plan, as it does not constitute a rezoning of any property. A further error that was apparent in some submissions is with respect to the ownership of the property in the Gospel Rock area. Some submissions ask that we not sell the property to the developers. I want to make it abundantly clear that the town does not own any of the property in the Gospel Rock area. It is all private property. Many people spoke to us of the significance to them of being able to enjoy parts of this property. People do need to appreciate that they are presently doing so with the indulgence of the property owners. None of us has any more legal right to trespass on that property than we do to set up our barbecue on our neighbor's lawn. One young lady at the public hearing very eloquently expressed to us the importance of her being able to enjoy the area that she calls Arcadia, which essentially is the areas commonly known as Cross Rock and Little Africa. While those areas are currently private property, it is the very essence of this plan to set aside those areas, as well as Gospel Rock itself, for public park, so that it will be preserved in perpetuity for public access. Before I conclude, I must comment on a couple of presentations that were made in which it was insinuated that members of council were in some fashion in the pocketbook of developers.
Who would do that?
A particular attempt was made to discredit Councillor Tredick on the basis of a campaign contribution that was made to him in 2008. I've had the opportunity to work with Councillor Tredick on the past council as well as this council. In addition to his duties on this council, Councillor Tredick also serves as our representative at the Sunshine Coast Regional District. There isn't a member of this council that puts in the time and effort on behalf of our community, as does Councillor Tredick. It is absolutely reprehensible to attempt to tarnish his reputation or that of any other councillor in this fashion, and I can only hope that decent members of our community will not tolerate this behavior. At this point, I expect that some, if not all of you, are beginning to wonder what precisely is my position in respect to this plan. Going back to the 1988 official community plan, it stated in part that a high priority must be given to obtaining as much of the Gospel Rock waterfront as possible, in addition to an area of parkland at the promontory which could serve as a lookout. This desire to protect the waterfront area has been reflected in the actions of previous councils with respect to the imposition of a tree cutting bylaw and the designation of Greenbelt area. It is abundantly clear to me from the submissions received that the value of protection of the waterfront remains a high priority and a prime concern to our community. Accordingly, having taken into account the public input and subject to what I hear from other members of council tonight, I am prepared to support the plan in its present form, but with an amendment to remove the option of waterfront development. A number of presenters spoke in favor of raising money to acquire some portion of the Gospel Rock property for park or public property. Attempts have been made in the past to do so, at least as far back as 1990, and so far have not borne fruit. There may be a further opportunity to do so now, but it will be up to those proponents to organize to pursue that avenue, and I'd encourage them in their efforts, and they must understand the town does not have the resources to do this. So I certainly will be looking to option B, subject to what I hear from other members tonight. But if we do find a way to proceed with option B, it's my expectation that it will be done expeditiously so that certainty can be brought to the conclusion of this long drawn-out process. Thank you. Councillor Treddy?
Yes, I also have a written statement, not quite as long as yours though. Council is assembled this evening to consider a very important issue that has been left unresolved for a long time, Gospel Rock Plan. First of all, I must refer back to the Local Government Act, which describes responsibilities of council members. The Act states that every council member has the following responsibility: to consider the well-being and interests of the municipality and its community. Prior to entering local government in 2005 and since then, I have always considered the well-being and interest of our community. I believe my record of dedicated efforts to create positive change in Gibsons and the Sunshine Coast supports this statement. I'm here tonight to carry out this responsibility as a councillor to the best of my ability. In a democracy, we are allowed to have different opinions and to express them freely. This same process gives duly elected government the authority to make decisions on behalf of all of the people. I'm here tonight to do that. In the process of making this decision, I will keep in mind I represent the entire community, not just those who appear at meetings. I hope that's a respectful laugh in the background. The Janet Curry Gospel Rock Plan was a plan that was brought forward to the newly elected council to review and to consider possible changes to the plan after referral to others for input and then debate. As a result of this review and debate, changes were made to the plan. At that point, the majority of council felt it was time to start the process of bringing the Gospel Rock Plan to a point of making a decision. The public hearing of October 11th was part of that process. I went into the public hearing with an open mind. I was interested to find out what the public thought of the plan. I heard from the public through written submissions and at the microphone. I heard some key issues. The most prominent issue was the waterfront development. Other issues I felt that were broadly supported were to do with density, road access and traffic in the aquifer capacity. I too have concerns about density, access, and aquifer capacity. During our early council deliberations regarding the Janet Curry plan, I raised these concerns and suggested that the plan needs to be modified in order to address these issues. As a result, the current plan limits development with road access and aquifer in mind and must be taken into consideration by staff and council before further development occurs. Now I'd like to deal with density. I too am concerned about the number of housing units suggested being possible in this plan. I reviewed the history of the Select Committee and the Refinement Committee. The Select Committee was comprised of public members, town consultants, Councillor Johnson, staff, and 2 landowners. The Refinement Committee ended its term with former Mayor Janik, former Councillor Curry, town consultant Michael Rosen, landowner representative Art Phillips, and staff. In both committees, there was a predominance of town representation, which over the process of these 2 committees, the density continued to rise from a low of 450 to the present 1,100 plus. I'm not fully aware of why the community members and the town representatives agreed to these increases, but they did, and now we have the density which I consider may cause problems in the future. I take the position that the density needs to be reviewed and reconsidered at a future date when we have our aquifer mapping completed, and this is an important item, and a financial plan that addresses future infrastructure maintenance costs. I now will address the most contentious element of the plan, waterfront development. What I heard at the public meeting and through written submissions is that this is an issue that is too important to the community to allow to proceed as it is included in the plan. I am prepared to consider removing the waterfront development from the plan as long as we do not need to revisit the entire plan. I must emphasize this point for the following reasons. The Gospel Rock plan has been planned, studied, reported on, reviewed by staff and council, received public input more than any other plan in our community's history. As a community, we need to get on with other business of the town. Too much of our staff resources, community resources, financial resources have been diverted to this one issue at the expense of ignoring other things that need doing. I'm in favor of adopting this plan, excluding waterfront development, and inclusion in the plan document a statement as direction to staff and future councils that states, density will be reviewed in 5 years with consideration given to the aquifer capacity, road access, and the financial plan that will address the town's ability to meet future infrastructure maintenance costs. And that's the conclusion of my statement.
Thank you, Councillor Trent. Any other councillors at this point? Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the things I'd like to ask a question of staff first.
Sure.
Michael, I would like to know more about how communities can determine a sequence of development on greenfield sites or unbuilt sites that have nothing on them. And if other communities are able to say, we're not going to develop in plot B until plot A is done, built up by a certain percent. Can you explain that a little bit?
Councillor Johnson, there are tools that are available for the phasing of development. Typically what you do see is these tools are used generally where municipalities are bearing the brunt of infrastructure costs, because there's a desire to avoid leapfrog development where high cost of infrastructure is being borne up front for development which is further afield. So in those instances, municipalities will put into effect policies which will require build out to essentially occur in a concentric circle manner so that the development closest to infrastructure is happening prior to the development further afield. Those types of policies, however, are extremely uncommon in the BC regulatory context because in this environment, developers do have to pay the entire cost to service their development with new infrastructure. So because that cost is not borne by municipalities, there are very few municipalities in BC, if any that I can think of, who have policies in place that prevent that type of development. I think the thinking is essentially if you would like to build that development further afield and are willing to bear the brunt of a very expensive increase in roads and sewer and other things that would be required, then that's your prerogative. So phasing of development hasn't happened through policy in BC in that same manner. That said, there may be tools that could be employed to accomplish that. If there's a desire to do that, I would have to report back to council on some of the options.
Okay, thank you. And I have a further question from staff to staff then. which has to do with can't hear? Oh, okay, sorry. Get my microphone closer here. It's hung up on my, thanks. Thanks. Okay. I would like to know how we can, one of the concerns that have been mentioned is the transportation plan in this plan and the road development in this plan. And a lot of the opposition and concern expressed by the community was around the transportation and access to Upper Gibsons that would remain in the town. And so I am wondering how, when you look at the plan, the densest development is at the south end. We need a road to the north that doesn't touch on those properties. So how would we be able to address that connection and ensure that development on the south end is paying its fair share of roads that will connect their development to the north?
Typically, the way that is addressed is through things like latecomers agreements, in which should somebody attempt or wish to develop a parcel and has to build a particular piece of infrastructure that other parcels will then benefit from, there's an agreement put into place with a particular period of time, generally 10 to 15 years, in which that developer is able to recoup costs for the infrastructure that they put into place. In this instance, we've got a somewhat different conundrum, and I think it's one that's been grappled with throughout the planning process, and the solution that's been arrived at is essentially to cap the total number of units prior to a extension to the north required to be built. This does pose the issue that I believe you're raising, wherein should whoever comes first does avoid the cost of paying for that connection to the north in the long term. I'm not sure if there is a solution to that problem or if there is a means of addressing it. It's another thing that I'd have to report back to council on. I believe it's most likely been addressed at meetings in the past.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. I'm asking you about that just to clarify, because we heard at the public hearing a lot of people being very concerned about increased density, increased traffic, and the impact it would have on our neighbors. And I find it very frustrating that we are not able, as a town, in this case, to control in the future the development of the one road that we know is so critical to provide this area as a development area a solid, viable connection to the rest of the town. And instead, we make an impact on our neighbors that they aren't very happy about. I'd like to go then back to my statement, which I didn't write out because I just wanted to do it very quickly. I listened and reviewed this mound of paper with all of the community comments, and I was struck by a couple of things about the people who are in favor of this development. One of the issues that seemed to be very important is that the process is too long and we just need to get it over with, and if we do that, it will be done. I wanted to comment that the process was started because a property owner requested it. The process was continued and extended for basically another 3 years by a property owner. It was not the town that initiated this process, and we have continued to comply with it in order to address the needs of property owners. And that's why it's taken so long, and I too am frustrated. I worked on it for 3 years on a committee as well. The other point was that by approving this neighborhood plan, we will bring closure to this concern. And I would like to point out, as did the mayor, and I think Councilor Tredick mentioned it too, every one of these properties will have to be rezoned. Every time there is a rezoning, we can be pretty sure that the community will be fully engaged yet again. So this will be an ongoing issue for our community for many, many years. And even if we have the plan in place, you can see we do have concerns about the aquifer. We don't have all the information in yet. We need to review it. There are ongoing number of issues that will have to be addressed as information is gained over time. So I think it's really important to recognize this is something that we have to live with. Once it was raised, we've had 6 years of agony, and we can expect that it will continue on. So I'm sorry to say that, but I think it's unrealistic to think that we're going to, if we approve something, it's going to go away. It isn't going to go away. Also, I just wanted to point out that the rights of property owners everywhere are controlled by zoning and by a number of guidelines that are approved by various local governments. And so for people who think, well, if I own private property, I can do what I want with it, we can't, none of us can. Another issue that I was concerned about was the issue of non-residents commenting on zoning issues and land use issues within the town. But part of the goal of this plan has always been to address the needs of the neighbors to the town, as well as the residents of the town. We know any development will impact our neighbors, and we know it's important to be good neighbors with our neighbors. There were people for the plan and against the plan that live in the town and live outside the town. So to me, whether you live in the town or not is not a problem. The real problem is what can we agree to as a land use form that will meet the needs of people in the community. It was clear to me that the community will is to avoid development on the waterfront, and that is the overriding issue. It's also clear that people are very confused and have many different opinions as to how we could achieve that, but I think that can be achieved, and I would like to see us achieve that. With that basic principle in place, I think it could be possible to work through the plan, and as applications come in, that the appropriate revisions could be made. But we also have to address the transportation problems and density problems for some of the landowners who actually are suffering a decrease in density in a couple of cases. So we need to note that fairness has to be fair for everybody as much as possible. But at the same time, not everybody gets what they want, and that has been the hang-up on this thing all the way along. We've always come to a point where one side or the other would not concede. And that makes it difficult. I know the first consultant said, you know, he was always looking for the sweet spot where we could all agree. And it became clear in the end of that first plan that we could not find the sweet spot around waterfront. That the owners really, really wanted to have development on the waterfront. And I think the situation is still the same today. And I think if we can achieve a plan with no development on the waterfront, we can fix the other questions and conundrums that arise on the upper bench in the plan. But I think it's also important to know that this community does not need development in this area. We have plenty of land available for future development in the Upper Gibsons neighborhood plan. And as a result of the harbor planning area, we've seen how the harbor area can absorb additional units through increased density. And developing in these areas makes real sense because there's pedestrian access to services, there's public transportation, the infrastructure is already in place or is quite easy to achieve as we move along. And that's what I really would prefer us to do. But since we're not able to do that, I guess we'll have to go ahead and see what we can do with Gospel Rock, but I really do not want to see development on the waterfront as a direction from this community.
Thank you. Councillor Baumann?
Thank you, Mayor Rowe. I had a lot of ideas about how to open the conversation and what to cover coming into the meeting tonight, and I was a little surprised by the mayor's statement and also Councillor Tredick's. And it's such a gracious position to take at this point in time, so I thank you for your consideration there. One of the most remarkable things about Gospel Rock is how deeply people feel about it. It's an experiential thing and it's a very personal thing for many, many people. And I was going through all the responses, and a lot of them are very personal and very revealing of the person. And wondering, will the council respect the will of the public? And saying to myself, well, we have to press on here, and you know, council does or council doesn't, we'll still have to move on. And I get here tonight and find that there's actually a lot of agreement. And I think that's important to note. I think it's important for each person that participated in the process to see that their input was respected and that it made a difference. And I didn't expect to be saying that tonight. I've been in the process from the very beginning. I went to all the select committee meetings, all the open houses, the design charrette. I went to the meetings of the refinement committee. I was not a fan of the refinement committee. My main objection was that there was no public representation. I remember then Mayor Janik said, it's a refinement committee, we're not going backward, but then it did go backward and it reversed the findings of the select committee. And I was very, very disturbed by that. And there were a lot of things that I was very, very disturbed. I didn't feel that the refinement committee practiced very astute science, and that's a big issue to me. It's a theme in my life that you can have the greatest science in the world, but it's a major difficulty to get decision makers to accept science. And of course, there's always more to weigh than science. But in any case, I'm happy with the turn of events tonight. I'm very happy to see you all here. And I like the way things are going, and I expect there'll be some more comment, and then maybe we can bring motion forward and have an early night of it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sanchenko.
I wanted to thank the other councillors for their comments. This is a big evening. I wrote mine maybe a little differently. I did prepare it because I am nervous, so I just got right to the point. I would like to encourage councillor to explore option B as provided in our planner's report in tonight's discussion. And subject to what I hear discussed this evening, I am in favor of proceeding forward with the Gospel Rock neighborhood plan with the possible changes that we discuss and identify, namely in my mind, no waterfront development. As a new councillor, this has been a really tough issue for me. I have friends, mentors, and members that I really respect in the community on both sides of this issue. Okay, big girl shoes. I respect all of them, and here I sit. I understand the community is split on this decision and has been far longer than I have ever lived here, and I respect that decision. Some will agree with my stand tonight and others will not. some opinions suggest that this plan in its current form does not meet all of their concerns. I believe moving forward with this plan while protecting the waterfront represents reasonable fairness to our community as a whole. And I just wanted to make 2 comments about reasonable fairness. On one side, it presents reasonable fairness to those who are passionate about purchasing land and creating a nature reserve. I believe there is political will on our council to support such an initiative. I believe that placing positive, focused energy on taking action to do so now, after 7 years of dissension on the neighborhood plan, is important. I'd like to see us move forward with that. I also believe it represents reasonable fairness to the significant community investment that has been made on this plan over the last 7 years. A valuable investment of time, energy, expertise, and taxpayers' dollar that I don't believe should be discarded. Planning is a process, and much good work has been done on this plan. It is a process, and more good work will continue to be done. I believe that Councillor Tredick and Councillor Johnson have made reference to some of those priorities. I wanted to take this opportunity to express some of my personal concerns that I feel are not being addressed if Council votes not to proceed with this plan after our discussion. There are 7 of them. As a new councillor, I entered local politics, and I'm not a politician. I'll be the first one to tell you. I'm concerned about some very real issues and priorities that have sat on the back burner of our community for a number of years that go above and beyond Gospel Rock. I'm concerned about the quantity of time, energy, and investment that has gone into this plan over the past 7 years at the expense of other priorities. I'm concerned that our community is being led by an OCP that is 7 years old and perhaps could be looked at to have a review. Our world moves at a very quick pace. I'm concerned that Gibsons has the reputation as a town that makes plans and plans and more plans, but stalls on their implementation. I'm concerned about our limited staff resources and the resources of our town that are focused into 1 or 2 strategic priorities or of council, or seem to be, while others remain neglected in comparison. I'm concerned by the apparent amount of misunderstood and half-understood information that exists in our community. Sometimes we know enough to be dangerous, just enough, and sometimes we know enough to stand in our own way. Most of all, I'm concerned about the overall health of our community. As you know, I'm very concerned about health, both physically and economically, which to me doesn't appear to be given the same priority as environmentally. Thank you so much for allowing me to be part of this process, which has been a bit scary. Thank you for the letters, the emails, the participation in the public hearing. Thank you for listening to my reasons. I do believe moving forward with this plan is the best decision that we can make after our discussion and possible changes. We are a council that is representing here tonight, that we can come together as a team, working as a team, and I just jotted this down. We respect each other, even though we have differing views. We honor each other. We learn from each other. There was a challenge thrown out at the public hearing the other night, and now I'm going to throw out a challenge of my own. We are ready to work together and to move forward together. We need the community to do likewise.
Thank you, Councillor Sanjanko. Okay, I want to leave this meeting with some certainty. Councillor Tredick, I had the sense that you had the formulation of a resolution that you could perhaps make at this point.
I didn't write it for that reason, but
Well,
I can certainly make an attempt. I'm terrible at making resolutions. Anyways, I think it falls in line with option B, I believe. And the resolution could go something like this, I guess, that staff be directed to revise the official community plan as Michael had written in our option B, such that we will adopt the plan excluding waterfront development. However, include in the plan document a statement as direction to staff and future councils that states density will be reviewed in 5 years with consideration given to the aquifer capacity, road access, and financial plan that will address the town's ability to meet future infrastructure maintenance costs. And if other councillors feel that's not quite covering the ground, I'd be quite open to an amendment.
Yeah, the first part of it, we have to modify, because you did say adopt. We would not be adopting the plan. What we're doing here, the recommendation would be to amend the plan, essentially to delete any references to development on the waterfront from the plan.
Motion to amend the plan.
A motion to amend the plan to delete any references to waterfront development in the plan. So that's the first part of that motion. And the second part was your other...
about the density in 5 years.
Oh, the density. Has that been captured by, I guess, the corporate officer?
The density will be reviewed in 5 years with consideration given, that line?
Yes.
Yeah.
So can you read what you are seeing there as a motion that's put forward by Councillor Tredick, so we're clear?
Just give me 1 second.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let's try this. That staff be directed to revise the OCP as written, such that we will delete any references to the plan excluding waterfront development, and inclusion in the plan document a statement as direction to staff and future councils that states that density will be reviewed in 5 years with consideration given to the aquifer capacity, road access, and the financial plan that will address the town's ability to meet future infrastructure maintenance costs.
Okay, can you read the first part again? About the waterfront, I'm not sure, right?
Okay. That staff be directed to revise the OCP as written, such that we will delete any references to the plan, excluding waterfront development.
No, that's not working. That's not working. It would be that staff revise the amendment to the official Clean Map Bylaw number 985/2005, amendment bylaw 958-8/2012 by deleting any references to development on the waterfront. I think that's... Does that capture it? Does that give you something to work with?
Mr. Mayor, I would suggest perhaps being more specific to include removing the reference to the cluster designation on the waterfront and replacing with a green space designation.
Okay. Councillor, was that me?
Yep.
I think it's a little more precise, actually.
It's going to take a while to get this.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's very important.
Can I get that again, Michael?
I want to leave here with certainty as to what the recommendations are tonight.
So Michelle, that staff be directed to revise official community plan bylaw number 985/2005, amendment bylaw number 985-8/2012 as follows: to remove the cluster designation from the waterfront lands, replacing this with a green space designation.
Wait.
A little too fast.
You're going way too fast. Okay. The cluster designation plan, okay.
Remove the cluster designation
Yeah.
from the waterfront lands,
From the waterfront plans.
replacing this with a green space designation, and removing any other
Yeah.
references to
Mm-hmm.
waterfront development,
Mm-hmm.
and then continuing on with the remaining
And then,
part of the motion.
let's see. and then go into inclusion in the plan document, a statement as direction to staff and future councils. The density will be reviewed. Continue.
And I think there's a third element to the motion too, and that is to report back to council with recommendations for proceeding, which is part of this.
Yes.
I think that I need to make it clear for people who are here tonight. If this is ultimately the decision of council, it will require another public hearing because it is a significant amendment to the plan. No, I know the eyes are rolling, but we intend to proceed expeditiously. All right, so we have that motion moved by Councillor Tredick, second. Councillor Bowman, all in favor? My motion is carried. Okay, any inquiries at this point? All right, bylaws for final adoption, the permissive property tax exemption bylaw. Ian, quick summary of that.
Thank you, Mayor Roll. This is an adoption, bylaw for adoption, which essentially gives some property tax exemptions to properties, and it's for 3 years, and that's kind of a major change from the other. And it does allow us options to revisit, not a carte blanche, 3 year.
Okay, so just a mover for that, please. Councillor Johnson, second. Councillor Tredick, all in favor? Carried. Okay, third reading, final adoption of this bylaw we discussed tonight. That simply will be left alone. We won't do anything with that at all. And I'm going to invite council. We can go to council reports, but I want to keep them or pass on them tonight. Are we okay with that? Councillor Johnson?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, among other things, that the art crawl is this weekend, and we can all go have some fun.
All right, let's just have a motion to adjourn, please. Councillor Bowman, second. Councillor Sandenko, all in favor? Carried.